What's going on, everybody? It is that time again, the Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 99 on this Thursday, July 25th, 2024. 36 days from the opener, Oklahoma Temple on Friday, August 30th. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy. Camp opens next week. We're getting very, very close to some real-life pads, the football flying around the field a little bit. Kind of feels a little surreal. We're excited. We're looking forward to it. But before we get there, big recruiting week for Oklahoma. It's a big visit weekend, both today with Sooners Under the Stars, Party at the Palace coming up this weekend. Of course, we have Collin here. He's going to preview it, all the names, headlines, storylines you need to know going into the rest of this week. Also, Floyd Boucard, we talked about him a little bit on Monday, in the tank, what that pickup means, and also kind of defensive line. Is Oklahoma done? Maybe not. We'll talk about that with Collin as well. He was also at the Texas High School Coaches Association Coaching School down in San Antonio, a bit of a tongue twister. He's got some takeaways from that we'll get into a little bit on the show as well. So a full loaded recruiting program for you on a Thursday. Let's go ahead and start with Floyd Boucard, though. So we've talked about him a couple times. He committed to Oklahoma on Saturday, the Miami product. Becomes the fifth guy on that defensive line to commit in there, inside guy for Todd Bates. Collin, obviously, Floyd, as far as what the player is and what he brings to the table better than I would or even Tom. We talked about him a little bit on Monday, but I paint the picture a little bit for what the get means and how he fits into this power line part two as the fifth guy on this defensive line in 2025.
This is a perfect fit for Oklahoma, man. Like, I really like this get, not just because of the player, but I think within the context of what Oklahoma does defensively and what this program is trying to be. Floyd Boucard couldn't have really found anybody better at this point in the cycle. And here's why I say that. Floyd Boucard, to me, is someone who, from a recruiting perspective, to start this thing here, it always kind of felt like he was going to end up somewhere else. I mean, you had various programs mentioned at the top for him at one point or another, whether that was maybe an Alabama, a USC, a Miami. It felt like for months, and it was months, that he was just going to naturally land somewhere not named Oklahoma. And then we get to the official visit in mid-June, right? And that, to me, is where everything kind of started to shift in OU's favor. And I do think it's kind of poetic that a big reason why this thing started to shift was because guys not only like David Stone, but Jaden Jackson, who felt like he was going to land anywhere but Oklahoma, helped OU recruit this guy. And so Floyd gets to spend time around those two. He gets more face-to-face time with Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis, this entire defensive staff. And from that point on, it was like, man, this is a very natural fit for me. And quickly things materialized. All of a sudden, it felt like within about a month span of time, he had OU shoot to the number one spot in his process. And then I still remember getting some calls and texts from some of the current OU commits saying, hey, Floyd Boucard is coming. And I was thoroughly impressed with the way that the tide kind of shifted in favor of OU. And again, I go back to the natural fit. So this guy is born in Canada. He comes down this way. He was playing out in Alabama last year, Josh, I believe. Now he's at a storied program in the state of Florida in Miami.
Yeah.
But this guy came down from Canada without really any regional ties, if I'm being honest. Sure, he spent a majority of his time in the Southeast, but those Canadian-born players want to find their best fit. And I think Floyd, at 6'3" 315 pounds already, like, that's a stocky body, right? And if he is 6'3", that's great. If he's even 6'2", fine. But what I love about him is one of the first things in the 24/7 Sports scouting report that you see from our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, is that, quote, this is from Ivins, ceiling appears to be highest as a nose in a 4-3 front. That's exactly what he's going to be doing at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
He's heading into a 4-down front. You look at the build, Josh, you go, okay, 6'3", 315 already? Like, that's pretty big. Is he going to have to be a two-gapper? Is he going to have to be strictly a nose? Like, is he going to have to take on blocks and free up the three technique to get after the pass? Like, No, I think he can play nose. I think he can kind of be that shade tech in this defense. But I do think that when you watch him and you see him move, his movement skills, he's very fluid. Like he could play the nose, he could play the three tech defensive tackle. He can get after the quarterback a little bit, even at his size. And what I love about this too, we talk so much about these guys getting bigger or stronger or whatever. Look, 6'3", 315, it's hard to get more out of that frame, right? But what if you slim this guy down a little bit and
Mm,
all of a sudden you're sliding him all over the interior of the line and making it difficult for the offensive line to anticipate where a guy is coming from? And the other part of this too, again, at that size, some of the strengths in his game, he kind of wins with secondary effort. You can see he wants to win with his hands, continuing to grow in that world, but he can get off the ball pretty quickly. He's got some good snap anticipation, and then at that size with his movement skills, it's hard for offensive linemen, especially not that athletic, to kind of catch up to him that close to the body. And so I think this is a hell of a get, man. Like this is a really good evaluation, a perfect fit for Oklahoma.
yeah.
And again, we're talking about a defensive lineman of this caliber and these kind of traits that's going to help you win at the point of attack in the SEC.
100%. It's an exciting get, and you go into Florida and pull him. Like you said, you looked at the other schools chasing him, and it's a great get. And he's the fifth guy on this offensive line, like we said, three inside, two outside with Trent Wilson, C.J. Nixon, Kamori Moore, Alexander Shield Knight, and now Floyd Boucard. So five guys are in.
Yep.
I think naturally you would think probably it, but maybe not. Where are you kind of at as far as does Oklahoma still look to maybe add another body or two on the defensive line, or are they kind of set here with this group to go with that 2024 group that was so highly touted and kind of stack these things?
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of an important conversation to have, not just specific to 2025, but almost on a macro level, because I think fans are trying to still figure out the dynamic behind the scenes in a lot of these college football personnel departments. How do you evaluate what you should do when
Mhm.
you kind of get your guys? And I find this really interesting. I've had a conversation with a number of folks in the college realm over the last few weeks specifically, and I feel like where Oklahoma is right now, we kind of need to have this discussion. So they have these five guys, really good group, but the balance that you kind of now have to strike when you get your guys is okay. Do we go out and add another, or do we wait and see what happens here and then kind of address a need if it becomes a need later? And why I mentioned that, this sounds weird to say, Josh, but what a lot of people are trying to figure out is striking the balance between do you go out and get a defensive lineman when they are at their quote unquote most affordable as a
Yeah.
incoming freshman, or are you willing to spend another scholarship when you have your guys on a defensive lineman that's a highly valuable premium position, but then potentially have to sacrifice that time spent on a scholarship for the developmental side? And this is the key here, while you are winning. And
Mhm.
so, what do I mean by that? You want to go out and get these younger defensive linemen now, sometimes take 5, 6, maybe even more if you need to, because Lord knows what the transfer portal is like these days from a numbers perspective. These defensive linemen, they're not cheap, but they are definitely at their least expensive rate as freshmen, obviously high school seniors, things of that nature. So is it better to take a guy now and feel good about kind of the rising depth of your room? But then you have to realize, okay, in an ideal world, if I take this guy, I'm probably dedicating that scholarship for roughly 2 years.
Yeah.
And because first thing, you don't want to kick a kid out after his freshman season and be like, all right, we're done, on to the next, because then you're burning some bridges on the recruiting trail, and that's never good. But let's say you do take another defensive lineman, and then you're trying to develop this guy and develop this guy, but then you're committing a scholarship to a player that's not ready to help you win yet. And you got to go out and win, not only a time where you have to win, but win in the most important area of the field. That's where the transfer portal kicks in. Do you save that scholarship for defensive linemen that are more veteran in nature, proven
Right.
at this level, and can step right in and play for you right away. When I look at Oklahoma specifically, I don't know how they're feeling, right? I mean, again, these are conversations that I've just kind of been having on the side with folks across the
Mhm.
country in college football. And now we're going to kind of get to see what OU's perspective of this situation is, knowing that 2024 was really good to them, not just in the recruiting sphere, but that Dominic Williams getting the transfer portal is huge. I think the beauty of this is Oklahoma can kind of say, let's sit back and survey the field and let's see if anybody kind of jumps up our board a little bit. And I think there are a few names out there that would make some sense. Maybe Xavier Okponu from Denton Guyer.
Mm.
Maybe you try and go out and get a little bit of a flip. I'm not going to say any names, but maybe there are a couple defensive linemen committed elsewhere that Oklahoma might have a shot to try and get back in the mix with a little bit if they have a good senior season. Oh, you could do that. Or let's say we're sitting around, let's call it late October, and OU's kind of getting ready for that December signing period. And they go, okay, we've seen a few games of these guys under their belt as seniors in high school. We like the guys that we have
Yeah.
committed. 5 is a lot to dedicate to that group. And maybe we want to hold on to a spot maybe and see what happens in the next 2 months or so whenever we get into the winter portal period. They could do that, no problem, because of the 5 guys they have currently committed in place in 2025. So again, this is going to be kind of fun. Does Oklahoma choose off of a huge get in Floyd Boucard to maybe get a little bit risky and go after another in 2025, or just say, hey, you know what? That's a heck of a cherry on top. Let's see what happens later down the line. I think there are a few names out there that made some sense. I mentioned one, didn't mention a couple others, but 2 things: you should subscribe to Sooners Illustrated, and we should all be very interested to see how Oklahoma chooses to handle what's very successful right now in defensive line recruiting.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about the 5 guys that have in here. A
Mhm.
really good haul to go with that 24 group that we talked about a bunch of times, and obviously stack that on to the group before it. You know, with PJ Adebore and the rest of that group. It's come a long way in a short amount of time, and we'll see if they, like you said, we'll see if they dip their toe back in the water and look to add any more. But if they don't, obviously, it's another really good group, and with those 5. Let's look ahead to this week a little bit. So it's a big recruiting week, visit week for Oklahoma. There's the Sooners Under the Stars, which is going on today, Thursday. And then coming up
Mhm.
this weekend is Party at the Palace. We can, I guess, just start in chronological order. We'll go with Sooners Under the Stars first here today. Paint a picture for Oklahoma fans. Now, I will say again, you mentioned it, become a VIP subscriber. The full visitor list for these things is on the website for our VIP members. Collin does a great job every time there's one of these big visit weekends of getting a hold of that. So fans, our VIP members can just, is this guy going to be there? You can answer that very easily on our website. So we're not going to get every single name, but like obviously the key names, storylines you're watching, whatever it may be. We'll start with Sooners Under the Stars, which is today. What's kind of sticking out to you there that you're keeping an eye on?
Number one thing that I want to lead off with here, and I do feel that this is a underrated aspect of this event. So 2026 and 2027, those are going to be the cycles that are the focal point of this event. Sooners Under the Stars.
Right.
Party of the Palace this weekend is going to be your 2025s, the group that everyone's talking about. But folks, it's 2026 time. Like we're turning the page.
It's shifting.
And
Yeah.
I get we're in July, but it's that time of year. And I'll talk about that when we get to the Party at the Palace as far as evidence as to why that's the case. But in 2026, you've got 3 guys committed. And Josh, to me, I feel that the number one storyline I'm looking at with the number of recruits uncommitted that are expected to be on campus in Norman this weekend, for the first time ever in this cycle, you're going to have your quarterback recruiting for you at an event like this. Let's see what Jaden O'Neal does. I want to see what he can do as he goes to work alongside
Right.
Jonathan Hatton, who, look, Jonathan Hatton has told us like he does kind of love being that general manager figure. But now, like, Jaden O'Neal, it's time for him to step in and be the face of this class. And so you're actually expected, at least on paper, to potentially have all three of your current pledges in the 2026 cycle if you're Oklahoma for this event. Jonathan Hatton, Jaden O'Neal, and Ryder Mix the tight end. O'Neal and Cruz, time to shine is now. It's time to start building this group up at Sooners Under the Stars. And so the number one storyline for me, what can OU's newest quarterback commit and his early crew do as the representation of this class? Next thing, 2025 offensive line gets talked about a lot. 2026 offensive line recruiting, though, very sneaky. Couple of guys that I'm very excited to see get back on campus for Oklahoma. Felix Ojo, the big, tall offensive tackle from down here in my neck of the woods. He will be back at Oklahoma. He was outstanding at OU's camp over the summer. He was great every time I saw him in a camp setting. I believe he's 6'6", 285 pounds, long arms. Felix will be back on campus. That's a guy to keep an eye on. Toa Katoa from Trinity.
Yeah.
He is expected to potentially be back on campus for this event. That dude he's an early favorite, I think, for a lot of folks.
Yeah,
right?
Can't stand out. Yeah.
The size, the frame, but then the way that he plays, that's going to be another big-time offensive lineman that Oklahoma really wants getting back on campus. I believe Maxwell Robinson is expected to be back on campus as well, potentially. And again, there's a lot of ifs, folks. You never know with these visits events, but you can go and check it out. Noah Best as well from Midlothian, an offensive lineman that Oklahoma is very high on. 2026 offensive line recruiting. Another opportunity for, again, Jaden O'Neal, Jonathan Hatton, go get those guys that are going to be blocking for them. And then I want to close it out. Some big-time 2026s that not a lot of folks maybe are overly familiar with, expected to be on campus this weekend as well. Brandon Arrington, number 65 overall player in the country for us at 24/7 Sports. 6'2", 180. I believe he's a little bit of a DB, wide receiver, flex type. 6'2", 180 to me, that's a fascinating corner frame, but very interesting player on campus. James Tank Carrington. First of all, great nickname, Tank Carrington.
Yeah.
But also coming from some pretty great pipeline settings in Las Vegas, Nevada at Bishop Gorman High School. So obviously we know OU's kind of subtle ties to that area and that high school. DeMarco Murray's huge for Oklahoma, typically out that way. And one thing I haven't talked about a lot is Bishop Gorman's had a couple of dudes roll through that OU hasn't gotten overly involved with. But this kind of appears to be the dude that OU's planning to go after. 6'2", 270 defensive lineman, ranked number 34 in the country. So just outside kind of that 32 5-star territory for us at 24/7 Sports. Top 3 defensive linemen in the country as well, Josh. So huge name coming on campus at a premium position. And we just got done talking about 2025 defensive line recruiting. This appears to be someone that OU is going to prioritize in 2026. And by the way, he will visit Oklahoma starting today. He will visit Oregon this weekend. So are those the two kind of early front runners? Hard to say for now, but I do feel like that's relatively notable. And then another guy who could be there as well that I've gotten to talk about, a little bit more familiar territory, is Kevin Ford Jr. out of Duncanville. Oklahoma's got a real shot there with a guy at a place that they've struggled at times to recruit. And not only has Miguel Chavis really helped Oklahoma here, Emmett Jones is huge, opening doors up for Oklahoma as well with some of these Duncanville guys. And so 2 excellent recruiters potentially getting an opportunity to go to work on a priority defensive end in 2026. A few things I'm looking at as we get ready for Sooners Under the Stars.
This is where, we talked about it and, mentioned right at the top. I'm fascinated to see the impact, if any, or what impact they can have having Jaden O'Neal and these other guys already in the tank already committed, because we talked about it a lot with Jackson Arnold and what the impact he had in his year, and certainly what Kevin Sperry has done in 2025. Even if you want to back up to before Brent Venables with like Caleb Williams, the impact he had. These quarterbacks, when they commit early, they can really kind of help just build it all up. And this is really the first kind of opportunity to really do that, to really make some hay with Jaden O'Neal here in town. He's committed. He's got a couple of those guys with him, and they got all these dudes coming to Norman. This is kind of your chance to really make some serious progress. So I'm fascinated keeping up an eye on that and see how that develops. As like you said, 2025 is kind of, it's going to wind down a little bit. Page being turned, shifting to 2026 already. What was it? Is it Be Legendary? Is that what it was? Or was that somebody else that I'm mixing up with OU? Do you remember the hashtag? I think that's what it is.
I don't know what the hashtag is for 2026.
I think it's Be Legendary with a 2 and a 6 in there. I think I could be completely off and mixing that up with another school. You see so many of them. I think that's what it was, though. But maybe we should confirm that.
All those hashtags blend together. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like maybe I'm not good at my job, but I just don't care about the hashtags. It's like, dude, we've kind of done. We can recycle them the same cycle. You know what I mean?
24K was pretty good though.
That one was good. That one I actually appreciated.
The videos that went with it have all been pretty solid too. They played them in the stadium and whatnot. But anyway, but on that note, on 2025, like you said, party at the Palace this weekend. So that's going to be obviously 2025 guys. Like you said, a lot of guys who are currently committed will be in town. What do you watching for there? And I guess if you're an OU fan, when it's a lot of guys that are committed, are you just it's just kind of a cool thing? They all get to come together. What's kind of the benefit, I guess, from Oklahoma when you have this many guys who are already committed to come to town? Just kind of a check-in with them. What are you watching for there as far as the party at the Palace this weekend with all those 25 guys?
Yeah, look, it could be the run-of-the-mill stuff that they all get to spend more time together and build some camaraderie, get ready to enter college together. I don't know, maybe map out who might be rooming together at the next level, whatever. But I'll tell you this, a sneaky layer to this, talking to some of these commits, like this is kind of like a recruiting convention, if you will. So what I mean by that is all of these OU commits that are going to be at the party at the Palace, they don't necessarily have to recruit each other, but they're all trying to recruit the final few names still out there on the board. And when you're an Oklahoma coaching staff and you have the opportunity to bring all your current commits in and say, hey, here's what we got to do with this guy. Here's who we want here. Here's what we've heard about this guy. What have you heard? It's almost like a recruiting convention to close out the year strong. And so Kevin Sperry to Sean Hutton to all the Carl Albert kids, like they're going to be in town. And
slew of them.
A lot of these guys kind of have their own primary recruiter assignments, just like the coaches do. And so the way that I look at it, it's like, yeah, they get to spend time together, hang out with each other, take a breath and come together as a class. But they also get to meet with these coaches and be like, all right, here's what the plan is to close out our group strong. And you're not going to see much come out of it right away. But I think kind of that underlying nature of this is potentially going to help pay off later down the road as we get ready for another slew of potential decisions in August. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. A lot of guys choose to make their commitments just before the start of their high school seasons. That means those last few weeks of those August commitment dates are coming, right? And so all these OU commits getting together and meeting with the coaches and mapping out how they want to attack the final few weeks before those August commitments, I think that's kind of a sneaky advantage if you're an Oklahoma program getting ready to bring in all your 2025 pledges in.
By the way, confirmed, be legendary to put the finishing touches on the hashtag talk. It's the two. The 2 is the E, and then the 6 is the G. So it's L26. The rest of the word.
They really do some yoga with those hashtags.
I don't know if a 2 as an E really works.
Look, it's not just Oklahoma, just to be clear, but just in general, like the
Yeah.
way that these programs stretch out these hashtag thing, it blows my mind every time.
I don't think 2025 really had one. I think it's just hashtag XXV. That's all I see. I don't know if that counts. That's just 25 in Roman numerals. Very simple. I appreciate that. But
Simple,
24K is a high bar.
simple but effective. Maybe just like what the party at the palace could be. Who knows?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So to wrap up, I'll try and enunciate it better this time. The Texas High School Coaches Association Coaching School, which was down in San Antonio. OU was represented. You were there. Give 2 or 3 takeaways here from what you gleaned from down there. This is something that you go to every year. I remember last year talking to you about it. It's kind of one of those kind of sneaky, productive things that you do, and you really get to kind of get some insight on some OU coaches and what they think about some players and things like that. So give the people a couple takeaways, 2 or 3 takeaways from your trip down there to San Antonio.
Yeah, man. Listen, folks, 18,000 Texas high school coaches or college coaches across the country, all descending upon one place.
That's an outrageous number. I would have never guessed it was that high. That's crazy.
It's huge. I mean, and listen, for context, it's not just football coaches, right?
Sure.
But there's value in talking to guys in the basketball realm or what have you. In general, though, I mean, it was again another incredibly impressive and well put together event. Total number, by the way, Josh, 18,706 coaches all registered in one place. So that's why I go. The networking opportunity, shaking hands, getting
NBA.
information. I mean, it's huge. And so, a couple of things that I took away from the event. Number one, a lot of college coaches from not just the state of Texas, but across the country come in, they give lectures. I was watching a lecture from SMU's Casey Woods, and he did an outstanding job of talking about tight end play in the new age tight end. And I'm watching him, and first of all, some of our subscribers at Sooners Illustrated will remember me banging the table for a guy by the name of RJ Maryland, who is now a star at SMU. I wanted Oklahoma to offer him really bad. But then I'm watching this presentation from Coach Woods, and I couldn't stop getting distracted by Branson Hickman on film. I'm watching now OU's newest center as I'm supposed to be watching this conversation about tight end play. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, man, this guy's really good. Like you couldn't help but watch him. And his ability, even though you can kind of see it on tape, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but man, like hand placement, some of the grip strength that he had, his ability to anchor even at his size, work on an island even at center, like the pass protection stuff that I saw on tape during this presentation from Hickman was pretty impressive. And I mentioned it when OU first got him. I talked to some sources at SMU. They sang the praises of Hickman at the time. And again, just continuous theme there. Like watching that, I was sitting there thinking, man, OU's got a good one. And I can see why they were so excited to get him out of the portal, because I wasn't even really supposed to be watching him either. Right. Other thing, college coaches across the country, they come in. I know last year, like Shane Beamer came down. A lot of Nebraska coaches were there. A couple of years ago, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, all these guys come down, and if they're lecturing or what have you.
Yeah.
This year, I'm walking the convention floor, and I'm coming down an escalator at the time, and I see swarmed in the middle of the entryway floor, Emmett Jones and Bill Bedenbaugh. And you can imagine how excited a lot of those high school coaches were to see Emmett Jones and Bill Bedenbaugh walk through the door. And it's just kind of cool, man. You're going down the escalator and you're seeing this line form to talk to guys like Emmett and Bill. And it's a friendly reminder of what those two do for OU, not just in Texas, but especially where they heavily recruit, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, right?
Mm.
And so very cool to kind of see the reinforcement of what those two coaches mean for Oklahoma and one of the recruiting hotbeds of the country. You literally saw it with your own eyes as several high school coaches were trying to talk to them. And then the last thing I'll say, so what this basically is this convention. You do football stuff all day, you go hang out at night. Everyone meets each other, you're at different restaurants and bars and you're shaking hands, getting to meet new faces, catch up with old. And the last thing I want to close with is just talking to a lot of folks out there at the convention. The view of OU's program right now is very positive. And I know that's like, well, no duh. But like, you do get to these conventions and you get to talk to a lot of these high school coaches and you get their honest opinion.
Sure.
Right? Like,
Sure.
I don't have any problem saying it. Jimbo Fisher wasn't the most popular topic of conversation once upon a time this convention, right? And so just talking to a lot of coaches in the state and a lot of coaches who are around some of the nation's best on the recruiting trail, right? There's a lot of positive feedback heading back towards Brent Venables in this OU program. And that's what you want, right? Because the state of Texas is only going to get more combative from a recruiting perspective as that now becomes even more of an SEC recruiting hotbed. And then, oh, by the way, those Big Ten powers are going to come down and try and pull players up into the Midwest and now the West Coast. And so at a time right now where the Lone Star State is getting more competitive than ever before to recruit, it's clear to me that a lot of coaches in the state view Oklahoma and Brent Venables and this current staff very positively. And like the Texas high school football coaching mafia, like that's a real thing. And so to have that on your side, if you're Oklahoma, and I'm not just saying it, like in talking to folks, OU does have that on their side, huge advantage as the Sooners prepare to go into a new conference and try to recruit continuously at an elite level.
And I'm glad you brought that up and said that because it's funny because, you were there. Obviously, we were all there at SEC Media Days last week. And it just shows you the difference in kind of a little bit of the public sentiment about Oklahoma right now from the media and kind of fans perspective. And then from kind of more in football circles perspective. Because, you were there. If it feels like from an outside, again, fan media, not in Oklahoma, but nationally, Oklahoma's not really considered much of a factor right now, and they're kind of overlooked. I don't know if you saw yesterday, like they just came out with betting odds for like first coach to be fired this year. And Brent Venables is like 15th on the list. Like, I'll save you some money. There is 0.0% chance that Brent Venables is the first coach fired this season. That is literally no chance. And it just kind of shows you the difference. But it should give Oklahoma fans a little bit of some warmth there that inside football circles, people more in the know kind of see the way it's moving, the way that staff is built, and there's a lot of reasons to be more optimistic and positive than what it kind of feels like. Because it does feel like nationally, there's a bit of, Oklahoma's not really much of a factor right now. But, you got to prove it, and we'll see how it goes. But big difference there. All right, I think that's it. Good show. Lots of recruiting stuff to catch up on. We're back on a pretty normal schedule now, which is nice. Fall camp starts next week, which is wild, like I said. Next Monday, we'll be back with Tom and James. That'll be episode 100. We'll get you a chance to do some fall camp preview because fall camp starts. That's going to be a good show. We're going to lay it all out. What are we watching for? Storylines, position battles. We'll get into all that on Monday. Also have some hoop stuff going on, too. They all of a sudden have got some dough, some NIL funding all of a sudden. We'll talk about that a little bit on Monday as well. As we get into fall camp, and we'll catch up back with Collin next chance we get. Maybe not next week. Are you going to be out of town next weekend?
I don't know. It's one of those things where I'd like to vacation in theory, but we'll cross that bridge when we
can skip. We can give you, we'll work it out. We'll work it out.
Yeah,
but
we'll figure it out.
We're back on a pretty normal schedule now, and fall camp's coming up. We're about to shift into August next week, middle of next week. So it's getting real out here. That's it for now. Become a VIP subscriber again to Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com or SoonersIllustrated.com, however you want to get there. And get all the latest intel. Collin's all over it. Fall camp intel, all that stuff is coming up very, very soon. busy time, great time to jump aboard with us and become a VIP member to Sooners Illustrated. We'll be back next week. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.